a warm welcome to our Youth for Climate conversation, and it's our third edition. So it's really lovely to see everyone here, and for those who are into this session live on the Facebook page. And thank you, CDL, for your warm introductions and for having us. So I'm Cheryl, and I'll be moderating for today's panel. And I would be asking and taking questions from you all to our panelists. So don't, please don't hesitate to drop a message into the comment box. And I'm just so excited to introduce our amazing speakers to share with everyone today. And to kick off our program today, I'd like to introduce Ms. Paola Cortese. So Ms. Paola, she's actually the Indonesia Country Manager of Plastic Bank, founder of the Cortese Design Studio, Warung Rooftop Indonesia, and Zero Waste Life in Hong Kong. So Ms. Paola, would you like to give a little bit sharing about yourself and the work that you do?
Thank you, Cheryl. Hi, everybody. My name is Paola. As Cheryl has mentioned, I am the Indonesia Country Manager for Plastic Bank. But prior to Plastic Bank, I've always been interested in environmental issues and sustainability. And throughout my many careers, as an animator, as an interior designer, and as an entrepreneur, it has always been kind of like a core message that I try to get across to everybody that I know. I think my interest in plastic really emerged, especially when I lived in Hong Kong. I saw like just the many waste over there, not to mention also in when I lived in Indonesia. And I found out about a movement called Zero Waste, where people can actually reduce 99.9% of their waste and fit in an entire waste of their household into a jar. So I thought if people can do it in US and in Europe, I sure can do it in Hong Kong. So I tried to do just that, and it was possible. For 2 years. I had my waste on the first year that I tried it. It was less than 500 gram that I put into like this small jar, and on the second year it was 350 grams.
Amazing.
Yeah, so it was done by various ways, but that of course I'm not going to explain here. But right now it's just a Google away. All that it takes is just the willingness really to do it, and I'm sure everybody can do it wherever they live. That personal effort it was just for myself, caught attention from my friends first, and then friends of friends, and then suddenly the media start to interview me, and then businesses got caught wind of it. And then they start to ask me like, hey, how do you do that? And then I started Zero Waste Life to really consult these businesses and families who would like to do something similar. And I also provide kind of like a private dining experience. It's all zero waste in a form of like a rooftop kind of like private dining place called Warung Rooftop Indonesia. So while I was doing that, I was already living in Hong Kong for, I think, 3 years when I got to know about Plastic Bank. It was just one of my friends emailed me about it, that they are looking for a position, and I thought like, seems interesting. Just 2 weeks later, I was hired as an Indonesia country manager, and I thought, yes, this is what I want to do, because within Plastic Bank, as much as I love my own, having my own business and everything, with Plastic Bank, I really get the backup that I needed to create even more impact. So long story short, I moved to Bali, and I've been here for 2 years, and really trying to clean up Indonesia as much as I can while improving the lives of the people at the base of the pyramid. Now, not only do I work with just businesses and families, but really I'm working with the masses, people who really needs help and are willing to improve their lives by doing good for themselves and for their community by collecting plastic and making sure it's ready to be recycled. Okay, that's my story.
Thank you for sharing your inspiring story, Paula. And I'm sure our audiences would be very, very much interested to find out about the exciting different challenges and your different impacts that you have shared in your sharing earlier on. So without further ado, I'd like to invite our second speaker, Miss Maggie Lee. She's actually the program management at the United Nations Environment, and she's also an Asia Pacific sustainability professional that is currently joining us from Thailand. So Ms. Maggie Lee, she actually works on reducing marine plastics at the UNEP Sea Circular Program, and I'd like to invite her to share her experience with us. Maggie,
Thanks.
The floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Cheryl. Yes, and so very similar to Paula's work. In fact, I'm reaching out for her collaboration this month, actually. There is a very hard to ignore problem here in Southeast Asia. And those of us who've had the privilege of living in different places around the world may notice that in Southeast Asia, we are in desperate need of a change in our habits, especially with our linear approach to using materials. And by linear, I mean that it's a take, make, and dispose way of using things. So when we take things from the planet. These are the resources that we extract, and then we make things out of them. Usually we don't eat anything that's just off the trees or just coming up from the ground. We actually mold it with technology into something that's useful for our daily lives. And then we dispose of it. And that's actually the part that's most hard to swallow. For myself, in fact, I come from an industry that's very much guilty of creating these things. I began my career with the food and beverage industry, which is not so bad. I mean, a lot of the people eat in, and there's very little wastage of the things that were supposed to last. But there is actually a very noticeable food waste problem as well, and I can actually get to that in a bit. That's much more pertinent to climate, actually, food waste. And then I actually made my way to the retail industry, which is actually what you call supermarkets. And as you know, the wastage of that is now very transparent. Quite a lot of exposés have actually been out there to show you how much waste we actually generate from the retail industry. And we're all part of it. It's actually not a finger pointing game when we say that certain entities or certain businesses are more responsible than any of us. It's actually quite the circle of denial when we say that we're not responsible. We point fingers at these communities or these businesses. And then after working for retail, I eventually made my way into manufacturing, which is actually the key to the problem here, because manufacturing, in fact, makes a lot of decisions about what we put into the markets, what we buy every day, what is included in the food and the products that we consume every day. Many of these products that we grew up with are considered to be essential. But now that we do have the circuit breaker in Singapore and quite a lot of lockdowns across the world, we come to a different conclusion about what is essential and what is not. So this is a great time for us to be introspective and to look into how we feel about these products that are in our lives. What do we want from them? And how do we communicate with the people who make these products so that what we want is actually reflected in these products? And so I worked in two of the biggest manufacturers in the world. They composed roughly about 15% of supermarket shelves around the world. It may differ in that percentage because some places actually do carry a lot more of these goods of the conglomerates, whereas they place very little emphasis on the local companies. But nonetheless, it came to my realization one point that everything that we actually consume, especially these fast-moving consumer goods or processed food products, ultimately we either eat them or pour them down the drain, or we put them into the garbage chutes. In Singapore, there are the garbage chutes and recycling bins, but across the world, it could be just somewhere in a landfill, or a makeshift landfill, even worse, that is leaking into nature. And so that's actually a very pertinent problem to all of us, because as Paula mentioned, there are very few people who can actually do zero waste and manage to put all their household waste into a single jar. So the few of us who are actually stuck in these metropolitans, we're very much reliant on the supermarkets and also fast-moving consumer goods to run our everyday lives. And so I'm not saying that there's anything wrong with continuing our lives relying on products. What I'm actually now more interested in, especially during these times, as I mentioned, that are more introspective, is for us to re-examine how we consume from this planet, be it with climate change factors, or be it with things that are relevant to waste management. I really do ask all of us, especially the youths that are actually listening to this, because your life is still very much ahead of you, and that a lot of these things are still uncertain in your life. You still have a great possibility to change how you look at this world. And that's also why I think these conversations are highly meaningful. And thank you so much for CDL for inviting me today. Love to speak more about this and discuss with all of us later in this event. Thank you.
Thank you, Maggie. That was a very powerful message, and we look forward to having a very insightful conversation with you during the panel later. And now, without further ado, I'd like to invite Rahmat, who is the branch manager for Dompet Dhuafa Philanthropy and the founder of the Floating School, which is an education program to groom young islanders into becoming sea guardians. Rahmat, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much, Cheryl. It's very nice to meeting all of you, and thank you for inviting me for this very nice afternoon in Indonesia. Okay, so I'm also very interested in environment issue, youth movement, and education issue, and that's what brought me to meet Cheryl back in Singapore in 2000, like 3 years ago or 4 years ago. Yeah, it's been a long time. Currently I'm based in Makassar. It's in Sulawesi. It's under the Philippines and above Bali, so quite close to where Paola lives at the moment. So we have a issue in water pollution because Sulawesi itself, it has more than 170 tiny islands scattered around. And also the plastic waste is one of the biggest problems because lots of plastic floating all around the sea, around the islands. And this is a big problem that even the government and lots of NGOs still figuring out how to deal with this. But I'm very glad that today there's Paola here in the forum. So for sure, we also would like to talk more after this program. And also destructive fishing, because mainly the local people are working as a fisherman, and sadly what they are doing is catching fish and everything under the sea by using destructive fishing, dynamite, a poison, and that's very and that's damage the coral. So based on the data, around 36% of Indonesian coral are now in the critical condition, and that's very sad to know this fact. And around 32% of the fish that is that's brought in the market are containing plastic, microplastic especially. So it's very dangerous also for the people because we have a big seafood eaters in Sulawesi. So every day we eat fish for breakfast, like rice and fish, and lunch rice and fish, even for dinner rice and fish. So everything like fish, but sadly it has lots of microplastic in it. So it's very dangerous for the long-term consumption of this seafood production in Makassar, especially. And so we initiated a floating school in 2016. So together with my friends, after having the idea that lots of young generation at the moment do not really aware of the dangers of illegal fish, destructive fishing, which is very harmful for the coral and the ecosystem in the sea. So we created a fun educational program, which based on arts, literary, and media, and bring together young islanders on the islands to learn more about how they can contribute to save the environment, especially the sea and their islands in the future. So we created an arts classes and media classes and also literary classes. So basically we want to put the education based on the context on the island. So what they learn is very different from what they learn from formal school, because we want them to see, because our curriculum is one size fits curriculum. Like if you are an islander, you don't learn how to dive, you don't learn more about the ecosystem under the sea, but you still learn about something that is far away from your perspective on the island. So you learn something that's very far away from your island, you learn something about city and everything. So we want to put their minds that you live on the islands and this is what happened. You need to see the actual fact, what happened on your islands and how it can impact the future of your island. So through these classes, they are doing research, and at the end of the learning, at the end of the class, we create a exhibition where they presented their research, also perform. If they are in art class, they perform their performance that were created from based on the research that they have done before. And currently, we've been working with 200 islanders in 4 islands, 3 islands in South Sulawesi and 1 island in Aceh. And other than that, I'm also working for my NGO in Dompet Dhuafa. We have a green dakwah project. So basically, the idea of this project is to bring together the religious leader or preacher to come together and discuss this issue and put this environmental issue into their preach. So we try to embrace all the religious leader from many kinds of religion in Indonesia and give them training, make them aware that actually in all religion, I think, and we believe, it taught us that we have to preserve this earth because it doesn't belong to us. It belongs to all humankind. So, and because Indonesian people value religion very much. So that's why I want to take this approach to educate the people on how all the religious members can actively participate to protect the environment together, regardless of the religion, the tribe, the groups. So we've been training 20 religious leaders at the moment from one particular religion, but we are going to continue this together with the other religious group. So we will have that. I hope this COVID is gonna over soon, so we can continue in the beginning of 2021. That's all for now, Cheryl. Back to you.
Thank you, Rahmat. That is a really, really insightful sharing. I mean, like those are really different very diverse, different stakeholders that you are engaging, and I'm sure we all be very interested to find out from you, how you engage such different stakeholders. Yeah. So before we go into that, I would like to invite our final speaker, Emily Uy. She's actually a senior analyst at the Policy Studies at Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center. And she's also a youth climate advocate, striving to address climate change and bridging the communication and action gap for Malaysia. Emily, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. This is Emily, speaking from Malaysia, Kuala Lumpur. Nice to meet you all. Thank you, CDL. Thank you, Cheryl, for having me and the panelists here today. I guess very interesting sharing from the other panelists, and I think my experience is a little bit different because the rest of the panelists are more hands-on, dealing with on-the-ground people. But mine, there's a little bit of that too, but mine focuses more on the education and policy side. So I hope maybe it can shed some light on the other spectrum of things. So as Cheryl introduced, I'm now working with the Malaysian Green Technology and Climate Change Center. But just a little disclaimer, today I'm not wearing that hat. Today I'm really just here to share some youth climate movement experiences of mine, and also to shed some light on what's happening in Malaysia. So I myself have about 5 years experience working in the youth climate movement area in Malaysia itself. So how I started off was around 2014-15-ish. I joined this NGO called the Power Shift Malaysia. It is actually a movement that grew from the global power shift that was pretty huge back then. So the objective of Power Shift Malaysia is on climate education, essentially. And as part of Power Shift Malaysia, they come up with a new program called the Malaysian Youth Delegation, which also does climate education, but they focus more on the policy side. So I'm going to use MYD to refer to this organization here. So I'm more heavily involved in MYD for about 3 years. And what we did there really, besides the usual training and education awareness sessions for general public, we also have sessions with corporates and also university students, secondary students, because that's our main target, being a youth NGO. Besides that, we also follow the international climate negotiations closely, or we call it the UNFCCC, if you're familiar with it. So it's true that I had the experience to attend COP21, the Conference of Parties, back in 2015. That's where the Paris Agreement get adopted. It was a really eye-opening experience. I was there as a youth civil society organization representative. Honestly, the experience is really overwhelming because first, being an Asian youth over there, your presence is really rare because if you notice, most of the attendees are a lot from the developed countries. So being there, having your voice heard is actually very important. And I can share about how hard it is for developing countries youth to attend this kind of conferences as well due to, you know, funding issues and accessibility. Yeah. So what we did there really, this conference is not just a normal conference with talks and workshops, but it's a really hardcore type of conference where the national negotiators from different countries, from 196 countries, fly over and meet every year. And this year it didn't happen due to COVID. Next year it will be happening in Glasgow, UK. So what the national negotiators do there is to agree on something that all the 196 countries could work on to reduce the greenhouse gas emission, and Paris Agreement is one of the biggest outcome of it. So what MYD and also other youth organizations do there is not just participating, but also working together to mobilize the negotiators. Sometimes you see in the news that people actually, mobilize the negotiators within the conference site and also outside of the conference site to urge them to, agree on something as fast as possible, because this thing have been taking like 10, 20 years, and the progress is really slow and things like that. And also one of the purpose MYD was there is also to introduce this international fora to the local audience, because I think the exposure of Malaysian audience or even regionally is not really huge on the international negotiations. So right there, we will produce articles and publish it on our website on a daily basis, or even just do video conference kind of sessions to just, break down the technicalities of negotiation and what does it mean to Malaysia. So I think this MYD work, what I would say is it's a good example that it is a ground-up initiative, but at the same time, it has some sort of policy level impact. Yeah, so actually, besides MYD in Power Shift Malaysia, I also does a lot of different things. I actually have done fundraising before, media management, and also to fit today's team about waste and sustainable consumption. I actually conducted a few beach cleanup as well. So I can definitely relate to a few panelists here who shared your problems and concern about waste, because when you really go to the ground, it is really concerning because garbages and waste just everywhere and you don't even know how to start. Yeah, so I think all these voluntary experiences have opened up more opportunities for me, myself, and I hope this can be an inspiration for you guys, because it is true, these NGO experiences, I get to have full-time job in a sustainability related field. So I was in corporate sustainability for about 2 years, and I moved on to sustainability consulting for another 2 years as well before I joined MGTC as a policy study analyst. With the government side. So I guess climate change, like last time I was at the ground up level, trying to reach out and educate the public. But now I'm actually in a position where I am able to help connect the dots, to help connect people from the private sector, to talk with the government, and also maybe the youth and environmental NGOs that want to work with the government, I could help to connect the dots too. So I hope that through this experience, I could share more about my thoughts and also inspire more people to join this field. Thank you.
Thank you, Emily. That is really, really insightful. And one thing I have to agree with you with regards to your COP experience, being personally, being involved in the COP experience myself, and that's where I met you actually. I definitely have to agree, it's not easy, and it's such a diverse spectrum of expertise that is required, not only from people that we think are experts in the field, but individuals and ground up community initiatives. We need so much different people in this huge spectrum, because climate change is not like it's actually a multi-layered diverse issue that requires multifaceted stakeholders to actually be part of it. And I'm very, very lucky to have such a diverse panel with us today here. And without further ado, let's just kickstart our conversation. So I would like to take this opportunity to actually invite our participants to don't be shy. Type your questions in the chat box. I'll take note of it. But before I go into those questions, I have one big question for our panelists. So, all of you are fantastic, amazing impact change makers. And there's definitely, a lot of questions that have been bombarded onto you guys time to time, right? I'm actually very curious, what is the one common question that you are most tired of hearing on the subject? And, what would you like to address about that question actually? So anyone, feel free to share.
Okay, I guess I can go first.
Sure.
I think that one question is, will recycling save the planet?
Oh, yes.
That's what people normally ask me, and the answer is, there is no silver bullet in saving the planet. And by the way, the planet can save itself. It's more about whether we will be in it as we humans will be in it or not. And the answer to the question is no, but it does help. We have, well, I don't know, if each one of, but many people in the world have, thrown their waste into, not to the bin, but more to the environment, the rivers, the ocean, and especially Indonesia, with the second biggest ocean polluters in the world in terms of plastic, right? So what do we do with all of the waste that's already in the environment? We need to pick it up. We need to clean it. So if people ask me, will recycling save the world? No. There's a lot of there's, as mentioned, there's a lot of expertise needed, and each of us needs to contribute what we do best towards moving all of the humanity forward. But recycling does help.
I agree. And you remind me of this perfect quote. Is I think one of the former president of the United States said this before. It's like, if not you, who? If not now, when?
Right.
Definitely a lot of the actions may not create immediate effects, and may not create immediate change, but it still doesn't mean we should not take such actions.
Correct.
Yeah.
Each of our contribution amounts to a mountain. I think.
Yeah,
it's
totally agree. Totally agree. Any of our other speakers like to touch on this?
Can I share as well?
Yeah, sure.
So many people question my decision to work in NGO sector because I graduated from business school, especially in management and entrepreneur. And the question is always about, why do you do this? Because it doesn't pay bill, it's non-profit. So why you bother doing this and teaching the kids, asking people to save the environment, protect the environment, and etc. But I'm not bothered actually to be asked about that, but I'm very happy because that's the way I can enter and explain the reason why I'm doing this. So that's always get me excited when I explain, like, you know, like this earth doesn't belong to us, and we still have kids. We want to preserve this so they can also enjoy the beauty of the world. And we have to be responsible citizen, not to pollute the earth, because it's not us, it's not ours. So and this is something that I want to contribute as a human being, because I've got lots of I could access education, and this is, I think, the embodiment of how educated people can do something in the society.
Thank you, Rahmat.
Can I add?
Yes, yes, please, Emily.
Yeah. I think also what Rahmat pointed out about the no pay kind of work. I think we in this field will get this a lot. Like, what can you do for environment that gets paid and a full-time job? You know, so I think I would like to shed some light on this part, because I think because of Paris Agreement, there's a lot of wave going on globally, and particularly in Malaysia. I've seen regulatory change, and investors have been changing the direction to, I believe, it's the same in Singapore and Thailand and Indonesia too. So what I'm trying to say is it has created more job opportunities in this field. And it has actually happened to me, myself, and also my friend who I've met in the NGO circle. So they were just volunteers back then, but in this recent years especially, they have all gotten full-time job with NGOs, with companies like CDL who have a sustainability team, and so on. So this is really encouraging. So now I can proudly answer the people that, yes, we do get paid, and we get paid well too. Yeah, thank you.
So future young leaders, take note, like we get paid also, okay? We have to take Emily word for it. But thank you. Maggie, would you like to share on this?
Yeah, I think all the our panel speakers have been really like just a lot of words of wisdom there. I think more importantly, aside from taking on this really heavy responsibility of fixing problems that long existed before you or we did, is that we are stakeholders of the planet. There was actually this comment made by a political leader from where I come from that actually really irked me to say this, is that the youth are not stakeholders of society. I strongly disagree. They have every stake in this society, much longer than anyone else actually. And if someone actually messes up your room, even though this mess is not from you, we want to clean it up. Of course, we should stop people from keep messing up your room. And that's actually some of the things that Paola has also mentioned, is that there's really no silver bullet in fixing the environment or for the plastics or to get people more in tune with the environmental problems. But what really needs to happen is the sense of stewardship and responsibility. I see that being a very rapidly changing culture shift taking place here in Southeast Asia. And that is some of the things that really gets me to wake up every day to work in this field, because I know that there are more and more people who think alike. And as Emily mentioned, there are jobs in this area. That means that people are now paying people to contribute in this area, which is heartening, because our predecessors, the ones that we look up to, they may have actually begun this work much worse in much worse scenarios without getting paid, and also often even being criticized and laughed at, and saying that climate change is not real. What are you talking about? What kind of agenda do you have? But now I think it's very much an agreed truth that the community finally settles down on, is that everyone needs to have a stake at solving this problem, and we're all affected equally by this. Some of us more, but then equally, as in we're all definitely affected by this problem that we have with the environment. And breaking down the environmental problems into individual issues is what we're trying to do here, and we're concentrated on certain issues and therefore mastering our expertise in these areas. But nonetheless, I think the goal is very, very just singular and very pointed, is that we are trying to solve a problem that may be handed down to us from the previous generations, and we are continuing to be part of the problem. And that's also why each of us can contribute in different ways. As Paola has also mentioned, that our efforts can amount to very significant changes. And I see that these culture shifts are moving faster than ever on social media networks and on different platforms that enable us to actually gather people and spread ideas that are very, very fast. So TED Talks, Facebook, albeit sometimes with different notions, but we are sharing our ideas very rapidly, and even this panel talk itself as well. So listening to all these really like trailblazing ideas, some of them are very niche, some of them are very broad. But nonetheless, we just really need to actually gather the spotlight on the environment and speak for those without a voice of their own.
Definitely, definitely. Thank you. So we have some questions coming in from our chat panel, and one of them actually caught my attention. Is actually, in your opinion, which sustainability solutions are most needed to save Southeast Asia's cities, and how can individuals be part of the solution in small but meaningful ways? Any one of our panel speakers would like to touch on this? Should I repeat the question again? So which sustainability solutions are most needed to save Southeast Asia cities, perhaps in your own cities? And how can individuals be part of the solution in small but meaningful ways?
I noticed that Paola has also unmuted herself, but I'll take first stab at it and then I'll probably hand it to Paola.
Go for it.
As much as I'd like to actually point the spotlight on the problem that I'm actually working on, which is plastic and marine litter, I still feel that the most important problem of all is the climate crisis, which actually quite a lot of problems do contribute to. So that's also something that's much more urgent and needed. If we're talking about Southeast Asia, we know that a vast majority of this region sits in the tropical climates. And we will actually have it one of the worst regions when climate crises has a pronounced effect on the seasons and on the water tidal gist, and also on currents and on really extreme weathers. This morning I was actually supposed to be in the ASEAN University Network for Environmental Education held by the University of Ateneo in the Philippines, which is also very much Southeast Asia. And I guess they actually had to cancel the event today and postpone it to another day because of a very strong typhoon hitting their area, flooding many of the places around the Ateneo University. And so this is really happening, and what's between this problem and our current state now is really all the people here with us now, the people who think alike, the people who know that anthropogenic climate change is real. We do have a waste problem, but in my opinion, it's actually much easier to solve because we know where it's from and we know who's actually involved.
I see. Thank you. Any other panelists like to touch on this? Paola?
Well, I would like to echo Maggie on one of the things that she said, that yeah, as much as I would like to say, you know, start recycling or prevent plastic, actually, I think it has been. There was a research about it. I don't have it on top of my head, but there's the top 10 things that you can do to be more sustainable. And number two is reduce your meat intake, or be as vegan as you can be. Like go on 1 week, one week without meat of the year, or maybe like 1 day every week without meat. And this one single action have a ripple effect. It will reduce your consumption of plastic, but also, reduce the carbon emission that you are contributing to the world, etc., etc. So I mean, there's 1,000 different things that you can do, but I think, well, based on the research, that is one of the most impactful thing that you can do right now.
Thank you. Thank you.
Can I add a little bit?
Oh, Rahmat, after you.
Think, okay. So I think it doesn't have to be which one is the most effective or the most powerful solution to this, because we need every single action, even though it's just a very small action. But if we can do it together, I think we can make a huge impact, huge change in the environment. So it doesn't have to be something most effective. But as Paola mentioned, there's lots of lists of many things that we can do to save this environment. So starting from ourselves, from small action. And I like a quote. It says that individually we change ourselves, so together we can change the world. So that's it.
Thank you. Emily.
Hey, yeah, I think the team here is pretty consistent about climate change and climate crisis, and I can't agree more. But again, Southeast Asia is such a diverse region, and there's no one solution that can help all cities, because different cities have different climate challenges. Like Vietnam, they have a lot of coastal issues, so sea level rise is an issue for them. I think same goes to Singapore, sea level rise, so food security would be a problem. And Malaysia, there's a lot of flooding problem as well. So different countries, different cities have to take different solutions. But one thing that individual could really do is to educate. As simple as it sounds, it's actually the hardest thing ever to do. Trust me, I challenge you to just educate your family to start recycling and start, becoming vegetarian. It's going to take ages. So if that succeeds, you can go on and create ways. And about education, not just educate people around you, but educate the politicians, educate your local councils. They might know about climate change, but maybe you know more than them. So use as many engagement opportunities as you can to mobilize them, to ask them questions. What are you doing about climate change, so that they're aware and they can start slowing incorporating climate resilience strategies and plans in your cities planning and even national plannings. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Emily. I think I agree fully with you. The hardest thing, it's so easy to influence, like kids. It's so easy to influence on social media. But like the hardest people or hardest audience to convince is the people that is the closest ones to you. And I think that is one tangible thing and concrete thing that that needs to be done. I think one of our audience actually asked this question. Pardon me if I'm reading your name wrongly. Milex and Jose. They actually asked, it's inspiring to hear the thinking on the need to address the climate crisis. And she's actually quite curious on the concrete things that can be done actually. So I think one thing that Emily pointed out was just reaching out to the people and convincing the people closest to you. I think that is something that is concrete that we could all start doing. Would any of our panelists would like to touch on this, on one concrete thing that you guys might feel that is like very impactful that we should all take?
I mean, I think I said it for me.
Yes.
Like, please, maybe just 1 day of the week, no meat. And it has like a huge ripple effect, especially, when we're talking about climate change, but also the plastic issue, etc. Yeah, that's my 2 cents.
I see Emily unmuted herself.
Yeah, I think just to add on to Paula's point, maybe some of you don't get it, like how does becoming vegetarian or becoming vegan would help this thing. So if you know, most of the agricultural land in this world is actually, most of the land use in this world is actually for agriculture, and most of the agricultural land is used for feedstock. So all your cows and chickens and so on, and they use so much more land than the plants. So as a consumer, if you reduce your demand to eat more meat, you would then, the suppliers and the farmers will then feel it, and there's no need to produce so much anymore because people are not really keen to eat so much meat. So and it's a chain cycle. Of course, you wouldn't see it yourself directly, but this is how one individual action could create a systemic change. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Just remember that the question actually is, how does being vegan or vegetarian actually helps, right? Yeah, thank you for explaining that. And perhaps I can add one fact that, if you're vegan, you can decrease your consumption of water also by 40 to 70%.
Wow.
You eat. Also, there's that methane problems with cows, if you know what I mean.
Thank you for sharing. I have another question from the audience that I'd like to ask the panel. So, the UN SDGs, this is by Miss Esther. The UN SDGs are a strong common language for governments, businesses, and people for sustainable development in particular in the emerging markets. Could our panelists share, your observations on the awareness and adoption of the 17 SDGs?
Okay, since it has the 2 letters UN in it, I feel that I'm obligated to be the first person to
Thank you.
take first stab. The UN SDGs, or the Sustainable Development Goals, there are 17 of them. And I would say that the Millennium Development Goals is actually like a failed version of it. But now the SDGs are much more widely adopted. Out of all the SDGs, there are 16 that are pertinent to specific problems or ideals, actually. Some of them are actually highlighting problems or highlighting specific issues, but in a positive way, like, for example, zero hunger, for example, like that, or poverty. In other ones, there are actually much more abstract ideas, for example, like responsible consumption and production. So these ones are less tangible because you know what hunger feels like, you know what poverty is, you know the face of that. But how does responsible consumption and production actually look like? It's actually still more like taking an airplane and while it's being put together. So it's actually very much a concept that needs a lot more refining, and it's not well developed to a point that we can actually just give you a book that says guideline to SDG 12, responsible consumption and production. I wish we did. I mean, we are trying to build up guidelines in that area, but there is really no silver bullet for this either. And that's actually the problem with most environmental problems. And now with the SDG 17 is actually just more of a way to say that we can't solve these problems alone. No one sector or one discipline can actually really come up with something that's like a ding, and then an epiphany dawns upon the entire humankind. We do need to work on this together. The 17th SDG is more general. It is about the collaborations of all of us. And us, meaning people who are citizens, consumers, people who are making choices, who are supporting the economy, people who are making, molding our education, molding our societies. We do have really large stakes in this. And that's also why we are trying to create more contemporary definitions of the SDGs, we as in everybody, and especially the UN agencies. And this is actually not pertinent only to the environment, mind you, especially as I mentioned that there's quite a lot more involved, especially with the social issues. We're very used to knowing the social issues, but we don't refer to them as sustainability, which is something that the SDGs are trying to change. Equality, equal rights, poverty, hunger, these are social issues that we've long known. We've known them since birth. But with the SDGs, they are trying to highlight the importance of each and every one of these issues. And so if you do have questions about them, I'm happy to answer any specific questions on the SDGs, but they are unfortunately not very defined at this point, and more definition is definitely to come as time goes on.
Thank you, Maggie. Would any of our other speakers like to touch on this as well?
Yeah, just a little bit maybe on the Malaysia context. I think in Malaysia, SDG is getting really popular, especially among the private sector. I think government has set a really good example in aligning our Malaysia plan with SDG. So, and then it get cascaded down. A lot of our listed company have also start to adopt and align their plans with SDGs. And you know, it's not just purely aligning, but there are more and more training needs for the boards and also management to understand what is climate change, what is sustainability and SDG. So I think in Malaysia itself, I would say it's pretty positive. Yeah.
Thank you, Emily. Any of our other speakers like to touch on this before I ask the next final questions?
Okay. So from the perspective of organization at grassroots level, at the beginning, we didn't aware that like we work for SDGs. I mean, even though without SDGs, we're working on educating people, give access to educations, bring some change in life below water, fighting against poverty, and etc. But since there is a concept of SDGs now, recently we just invited by the government to report our works in a grassroots level, and they try to map it out throughout the SDGs categories.
I see. Thank you. Okay. I'm gonna ask the next question. Okay. So speaking of the SDGs, out of all the goals and out of all the terrible things that happen in the world, poverty, war, lack of universal education, healthcare, etc., do you think environmental protection should be prioritized at the top of the list? Why and why not? If anyone says no. This might need some time to ponder, yeah? Great question from Marilyn. Any of my speakers like to take a jab on this first?
Would you mind repeating the question, please?
Oh, okay, I might have spoken too fast. So, you know, out of the terrible things that is happening in this world, right? Poverty, war, lack of universal education and healthcare, you know, all the different things that the SDG is trying to focus. You know, do you think environmental protection should be prioritized at the top of the list? Yeah.
Well, perhaps I'll try to tackle that. For me, the answer is a no. I think it is appropriate that poverty is put as SDG 1. You know, because if we solve the poverty issues, then you know, it is a lot easier to educate about to the masses about all the other issues. I guess you know, from my experience working with really the poor and with Plastic Bank, you know, these people, it's not that they don't care about the environment, etc., but it's really hard to think about the future, about the community, about the planet when your belly is not filled. So that's why, at least in Plastic Bank, we take a very realistic approach and say, like, you know, plastic it can be a source of money to you. It can be it can improve your life, increase your daily income. And when each of our the quality of life of each of our member improves, and we build trust with them, then we can educate more about, you know, big issues like something more abstract, such as like, okay, you are actually heroes because you are improving your lives, but you're also taking plastic from the environment, for example. And poverty is also like a very, it's a complex issue, and solving it does elevate the other issues forwards and upwards. So yeah, to me, poverty is the topmost still.
Thank you, Paola. I agree, no issues is a standalone issue. And, poverty, war, welfare, is all, hand in hand with the environmental issues. Would any of our other speakers like to touch on the questions before I ask the final question? Maggie, would you like to touch on this? Yeah.
Sure. I do agree that poverty is paramount to the effective to having an effective society in general, and especially with the COVID-19 pandemic, it is putting a very, very huge tidal wave on all of our livelihoods. Even for us environmentalists, we know that funding will now be shifted to different things now. We know that there's a channeling of funding to actually salvage the economy, to bail out big businesses. So there is going to be an effect on everything. But then again, I also want to be a devil's advocate in saying that without the environment, we really have nothing. And the environment is very pertinent to, let's say, stock harvest. We know that we will not have food if the environment is wrecked. So it's a very simple concept, and I think that the person who asked this question, they know this very well. And I think that the person who asked this question is asking more about the priorities. Unfortunately, the environment is always a silent stakeholder. We know of the tragedy of the commons, which is actually when there's a common good, let's say fish in the lake, it's free for you to take. So when you actually get a net or some fishing gear, you can get the fish out of the lake and it's yours. When common good is actually available to everybody around that lake especially, then there's really no safe way to regulate how much fish is being taken out. At one point, when there's too much fish being taken out, then we know that the fish has a very low rate of reproducing, and the rate of replenishing itself is actually lower than that. And so at one point, we will have a lake without fish. And so this is very pertinent to everything in the environment. And unfortunately, even clean air now is a common good, and it's now depleting more and more as pollution takes up our atmosphere. So in short, I think the environment, for me, environmental problems should be prioritized as number one, because we will all be climate refugees if we continue this path.
I agree. Thank you. Thank you. There's a saying that time flies when you're having fun. So like we're almost at the very end, but there's so many questions, and I actually took some of the questions down that weren't being able to address in our short time together. But I condensed it into one big question. Is that all the questions are seemingly directed, into this question, is that how can we advance the impact that we are trying to achieve through, the different avenues and initiatives that you guys are spearheading?
Sorry, can you say it again?
So how can we advance the impact that we are trying to achieve through the different initiatives and also the different, work that we do? Rahmat, I think you're on mute. Sorry. Hi, Rahmat, you're on mute.
Oh no, I think the others can
Oh, okay.
touch on this first.
Sorry. Yeah. Would anyone like to touch on this? Okay. There's one more question that is really interesting. Is given the pandemic situation, what do you think would be a key to ensure that cities and societies are able to build back better towards a sustainable and equitable recovery? Anyone like to touch on this?
There are no takers. I'll just continue to babble. I do have worked up quite a few years of not being able to actually voice out my concerns when I was in the private sector. But with the COVID-19 pandemic, I know that quite a lot of organizations are now cutting back on human resources. There will be a lot more challenges coming from the economy. The UN has projected a 40% recession in Southeast Asia. These are staggering numbers, and I'm not looking forward to facing this, because as more and more businesses go into this kind of recession state, they will have a much less of a focus in reinventing their businesses. And us as consumers, we will actually go for the cheapest option. If we know of a more expensive option, I realized that as I was leaving Singapore last year, there were all these interesting zero waste stores that popped up. They were actually expensive. If you actually go there and look at how much shampoo costs, they're much more expensive than the fast moving consumer goods that we're used to, the big brands. It really is this thing called the environmental premium. And I think that that premium will be less affordable with COVID-19. And I am very worried about that. But at the same time, it's not all doom and gloom. We know that even as tourism industry takes a very hard hit when there are literally zero foreign visitors, the hotel industry has taken upon themselves to actually put up a guideline in terms of how do you secure your guests' safety when plastics is actually pretty much the only disposable item there is. So how do you actually get rid of single-use items as much as possible while being able to secure the hygiene and sanitation of the premises? So there are these people who are willing to take on the challenges head on, but more or less we really need to work harder than before COVID-19, that is, to tackle some of these major environmental problems.
Thank you, panelists. Thank you, Maggie, for your insightful sharing. I would like to take this opportunity to wrap up our conversation. It was such a insightful sharing from all our 4 speakers. And thank you, everyone who has participated in the chat. Unfortunately, due to time constraint, we might not have been able to ask every single one of the questions. But please do look out for CDL's upcoming events. I'm very sure we might have speakers that will be able to address the different questions that you have dropped in the chat. And to end things off, I would like to share this quote from what I've sort of distilled from our speakers sharing, is that, you know, we did not inherit this planet from our parents, but we actually borrowed it from our children. And, you know, perhaps, you know, we should, you know, probably take some small actions that we can to actually, you know, pass down lesser negative repercussions onto the next generation. So thank you very much for everyone joining us.